Is there anyone missing?
Yeah, you can hear me, can you?
Yep.
Yes,
Now we can, Peter.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. Well, we may as well get going. I'm working with two screens, so I'm kind of trying with the broadening out the screen so I can see everyone waving. So you're going to see sort of me turning to both ways, but you're going to have to put up with it. And seeing as this is my first meeting as chair, if I forget something, then just let me know, okay? I'm not precious. We'll get through it, okay? All right. So we start off with the Statement of Acknowledgement. So we would like to acknowledge that this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Okay, so we move on with the attendance record. Everyone is present. Yep, no apologies. Are there any motions to grant leave of absence? No. And no non-attendance. Excellent. All right. Are there any declarations of interest that should be noted on the agenda? No.
No.
All right. Easy. Okay. So if we just confirm the minutes. So we just want to, the recommendation is to confirm that the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee held on the 15th of February 2022 are confirmed as true and correct record. Has everyone reviewed? And we've got someone to...
I'm happy to move that way, Chair.
Move it.
I'm happy to second.
So Karen and Peter, thank you. Okay, and is there any... There's no business arising from the minutes, correct? Everyone happy?
You have to vote after the moving and seconding.
Everyone voting.
All those in favour?
All those in favour. Oh, sorry, going back. See, training. Okay.
Carried.
Good. Carried. All right. Okay, so then we'll move on to business arising from the last minutes. There's no business arising. Okay, so we moved into the agenda. The first item is the annual review of rating policies. And so the office's recommendation is that the Audit and Risk Committee recommends that one, the strategic rating policy be adopted. Second, the Gawler East Development Infrastructure Funding Policy be adopted, and the council review the rating determination for commercial and industrial properties within the existing tiered rating system for such properties as part of its 22-23 rating and budget deliberations. First of all, did anyone want to speak on this paper?
Through the chair, I can just, if you like, just comment briefly on the report before taking any questions. Through the chair, we've referenced in the report and that we're not proposing any changes to the key rating policies, i.e. the strategic rating policy and also the Gawler East Development Infrastructure Funding Policy. So as an administration, we've turned our mind to that, the annual review of those policies. We've provided some commentary in the report relative to those policies. However, as we've referenced, Chair, with recommendation 3, what we have sort of turned our mind to is for the committee at this juncture, and then council at the subsequent council meeting, special meeting on the 15th of March, to consider the proposal for the reasons outlined in the report for applying a slightly higher rate increase 22-23 for our what we essentially call our top tier of commercial properties. And for you, Chair Natalie, just to explain the structure there, if you're not aware, is that we're one of 2 councils in the state that apply this tiered rating system, which is allowable under the Act, and we use it for our commercial and industrial properties. And so rather than having essentially one rate in the dollar that applies to all commercial and industrial properties, noting that we have properties in that category that can be valued as low as $100,000, for example, could be a very small business in the main street, compared to the properties at the other end of the scale, which is, we sort of referenced in the report, is your national supermarket chains, your Bunnings, your Aldis, your Coles, your Woolies, etc. So there is a stark difference between the property valuations in the commercial and industrial properties category, and where you're just proposing to, as an option for the council to consider, is having a slightly higher rate increase for 22-23 for that top tier of properties valued at over $5 million, and primarily due to the facts, as we've noted in the report, twofold being the ongoing impacts, adverse impact that these sort of key properties, being the supermarket chains and your Bunnings, have on our road infrastructure by comparison to other commercial properties, but also, I guess, referencing what's happened over the last couple of years with COVID and the impacts on commercial properties, and noting, as we've disclosed in the report, it's been pretty well documented in the media, and that the likes of the national supermarket chains and your Bunnings, etc., have traded well through the pandemic. And so that was also sort of taken into consideration with our thinking. So the tiered rating system essentially has a top rate in the dollar for the high valued properties. Then, based on valuation ranges, we then provide a tiered structure such that the lower the valuation range, the higher the rebate back off the gross rate in the dollar for commercial properties. So it is we're certainly unique in terms of applying it for commercial properties. Peter Fairley-Jones, you recall, I think Salisbury had it, and it's still got it for some residential areas in Salisbury. And I think historically, for those members who've been on council for a considerable time and members on the committee for a considerable time, we have this, when we brought this in 2012-13, it was well received. We haven't received, or I'm not aware of one complaint since it was introduced. And when we brought it in 12-13, Mayor, you'd particularly recall how the traders in the town centre were very much against the car park separate rate that we had, and that was being increasingly controversial. So at the time, the decision was made to actually scrap that separate rate and replaced by this tiered rating system. So back in 12-13, the outcome of that change was small traders did at that time get a 20 to 30% reduction in their total rates bill because of the removal of the car park separate rate. But conversely, there were losers who did have increases, but they were phased in over 4 years. But I'm of the view the tiered rating system has worked very well, and we're just looking for 22-23 to sort of tweak that accordingly based on the factors I've just mentioned. But happy, Chair, to take any questions.
Yeah, Councillor Paul, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, Paul, through the chair, how does this affect the racecourse and Starplex? Although they're other, does this affect them?
Through the chair, yes, they are affected from the point of view that they're captured in the top tier.
Yep.
However, financially, under this proposition, they wouldn't be affected because they do receive a discretionary rebate from council that was agreed to well, most probably 6 or 7 years ago, such that the net rate that they incur is equivalent to the rate in the dollar we apply for what's called other properties in the other category. So yes, their gross rates would increase, but their net rates would actually only increase in line with other commercial properties not in that top tier.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions there, Redmond?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul. Just a question on the tiered rating system. Yes, it is innovative, and remember when it was first proposed. Just on what's your thinking around tweaking it as in the review?
Yes, Mayor, through the chair. Look, what we're proposing in terms of a tweak is to have the top tier, which is only essentially six properties once you discount the racecourse and Starplex. That the proposal is for those properties to incur a slightly higher increase in 22-23, and we're proposing in the order of about 7%. And what it would mean, Mayor, that we would have to initially strike the rate in the dollar applied for all commercial properties to reflect that they would get that 7% increase. But importantly, what it would mean would be the rebate percentages applied for each valuation range under that $5 million threshold. The percentage rebate would increase such that the net increase that the commercial properties not in that top tier, the net increase that they would incur would only be the 2.75% increase we're indicatively looking at for 22-23. So this is essentially targeted revenue on that top tier, and everyone else wouldn't be affected.
And just a subsequent, if I may, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So, and that's based on their profit. I notice you've got Woolworths had a 20.1%.
Mm-hmm.
We all know the supermarkets did particularly well during COVID. Is that acknowledging that? Is that the reason?
Yes, through the chair, Mayor. Yes, that's certainly part of our thinking. I guess, what we're thinking overall was the COVID's obviously had different financial impacts on different traders, and I think the media's obviously made it well and truly aware of the impacts it's had on local pubs or gyms or hospitality. But personally, I don't think what's more widely known is the profits that the likes of Coles and Woolworths have made, and I didn't want to be, through the chair, making an assumption in this space, hence why I did the research to look at their annual reports, to actually get the data. And I found that quite stark, that both Coles and Woolworths, for example, had, I think Coles had about a 7% increase, Woolworths had 20%, and net profits after tax both of over $1.5 billion. So I was just of the mindset, Chair, that we're looking at two completely different sort of models of operation during COVID. You've got these multinationals who have traded very well compared to small localised businesses that have often sort of struggled by comparison. So it was really just tweaking it, being mindful of that.
And Councillor Paul, did you have a question?
Yeah, another question. Paul, it's a 7% increase and it's a $30,000, which is suspiciously similar to the 2.5% we're looking at putting on the general rates. So will this amount be going to debt reduction or just general revenue?
Through the chair, the essentially would be going to, I guess, from an an immediate accounting perspective, it'd be going through general revenue as part of the general rates that we collect. However, what would also do would have the flow-on effect in terms of naturally improving our bottom line, which would be reducing our debt. So yes, from operations perspective, it would have a benefit on the operating result, but similarly, it'll be helping our cash position relative to debt.
Okay, thank you.
Right, Peter Fairley-Jones, did you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Chair. A couple of things. One is, has there been any concern expressed about this rate from these big organisations in the past? Or they haven't bleeped in the past? So
I'll just sign the check.
Yeah, through the chair, Peter, when we introduced the tiered rating in 2012, as I touched on before, there were winners and losers. The winners were obviously the small traders by the scrapping of the car park separate rate. However, the losers, so to speak, at that time was what we sort of anecdotally called the top end of town, the high value properties. But what we importantly did was we phased those increases over 4 years. Yes, sorry, Peter, what was your question again?
just whether there's been any pushback from
yes.
the people.
Yeah. Look, Peter, at the time in 2012, we didn't have any correspondence from these properties we're talking about. I have, however, flagged in the report, Chair, that to be consistent with our policy, I'd suggest we would need to undertake targeted consultation with these 6 affected properties, just drawing it to their attention through the consultation stage of the budget, depending ultimately what council decides to do in this space. But knowing, Peter, back from 10 years ago when we introduced it, we didn't have any sort of pushback from these sort of multinational companies, and I'd like to suspect we wouldn't really get pushback this time around either.
Yes, so just on that consultation, I mean, what you're doing is just increasing the rate, and you're increasing the rebates to the others, it's not a fundamental change to the rating system, so I'm not sure whether specific consultation, you might want to do it anyway. I'm not suggesting you don't do it, but I'm just questioning whether it's needed. So that's the first thing. And I also suggest that in explaining this, I'm not sure by saying because their profits have gone up this year, that's a good reason to increase people's rates. If that's the case, you'd find their valuations would also be increasing as well, so they might get hit twice. But you then find yourself in a position, if their profits go down the next year or whatever, then they're going to say, well, we want our rates to be reduced again. So some of the communication needs to be fairly nuanced, I would say.
Through the chair, if I could just comment there that, Peter, you're certainly right in terms of, I was initially of the view that because we're not doing any sort of fundamental change to the rating structure, all we'd be doing is increasing the rate in the dollar. There could, as you rightly say, be an argument for the fact that we wouldn't need to consult. But I was just of the view that, yes, the council may wish to go down that path, and that, as you rightly say, the consultation wouldn't be about, oh well, we've picked up on the fact that you've traded profitably and had 20% increase. That wouldn't be the message communicated. But yeah, so council would, if they were to pursue this proposition, would need to turn its mind to, well, did we actually technically need to consult at all? Is it appropriate to do so? Yes or no?
So how would you explain the increase then?
Through the chair, look, would have to be sort of careful in terms of explaining it, but I would certainly use as referenced in the report that council's turned its mind to a number of factors, particularly in consideration of the impact that these businesses have on our road network. And I think that will be a key part of the conversation, because they do have major truck deliveries happening on a regular basis. And I think members it was only the recent meeting, Sam Delana referenced the impact that, for example, that the buses are now having on 19th Street. And that's only been a relatively new occurrence. And so I was really just conscious of the fact of what the heavy vehicles have on our road network, which is as a direct result of these properties, and not so much from the other commercial properties that don't have that same level of impact. That would be one of the key messages.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other questions for Peter Brass?
To the chair, thank you. Thanks, Paul, for that good paper. And I also take Peter's view about not really talking about the profitability of those two organisations, but maybe comparing that, we're talking about, the deterioration of business, which we're finding with the gyms because they just couldn't afford the restrictions, whereas the other ones were still allowed to trade. And also looking at the 2021 profit year, I mean, Coles could and Woolies could quite easily say, yeah, that's right, because that was the year that everyone didn't travel, and yes, we did a lot better. But this subsequent year, that if you look at the 21-22 year and going forward, which is what these big private sector organisations looks at, will say we've got big supply chain issues, and we've got that much, expenditure trying to manage our supply chains and getting stock in and all, so they could mount a counter argument, to say, why should, so will you then reduce our rates next year if we can give you that same counter argument? So I think we should just say, yes, okay, the rate is going up, but we're actually comparing it to the actual business, activity. So we know that the gyms and that didn't have any, whereas the bigger organization was still allowed to trade, but don't mention anything about their profit. I think we just leave profit out of it completely. Because, as I said, they could quite easily, swing and do things with numbers that they want to show to you, well, and as Peter pointed out, if they have a much, if they say, well, we went from a $1.5 million profit and we only made 200,000 next year, well, that's a big drop for us. What are you going to do to compensate for us? We still have our infrastructure. We've still got trucks to run. We've still got, 3,000 staff to pay. So to me, I just think we'll leave the whole notion of profit out of it when we're doing your consultation as well. Thanks, Chair.
Good point. All right. Are there any other questions, comments? No, everyone happy with it? Makes sense. Okay, so if we go to the, sorry.
I'm happy to move the motion, the recommendation. Okay. Thank you.
So the officer's recommendation, as I said before. So
yes,
Mayor Redmond's moved. Have we got someone to second it? Another hand?
Oh,
Peter Fairley-Jones?
I'm happy to second.
Peter's got his little... Sorry,
yeah, okay, just wanted to make a final comment on
cool.
checking the what the valuation increase is as well before you adopt or talk to the Valuer General about what they're likely to do, just to make sure we're not double hitting them. That's all. Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, sorry, if I could just quickly comment in that regard. Further to the previous meeting, members, where we tabled the legislative changes, one of the key changes is that in terms of new revenue from growth, that a council can't rely on valuation movements. So in answer to your comment there, Peter, what it would mean that if, for example, your valuations were to spike for these properties, then we would have to adjust the rate in the dollar accordingly to get that 7% increase. So it wouldn't be a double dipping, because we would adjust the rate in the dollar accordingly.
So does that come in this year?
I believe it's coming. Yes, would be coming in this year. But this is what Peter, we've historically done anyway. We've complied with this new legislation. It's other councils that has triggered this change in the legislation.
Okay. Yeah. Understand.
Okay, everyone's happy. I'll ask for a mover, which we had as Mayor Redmond, and the seconder.
I was happy to do that.
You happy to do that? Peter Fairley-Jones, all in favour? Yes, everyone's in favour. Okay, so it's carried. All right, I'm just looking at Councillor Davies. He's moved to Adelaide Oval with Peter Brass.
Yeah, it seemed like a fun place.
Comparing sunsets. Okay, moving on to
We're all at the Adelaide Oval. Oh, how do you do that?
So moving on to item 6.2, which is the 21-22 review of the long-term financial plan. We have an officer's recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee recommends to Council that the 2021 review of the long-term financial plan be received and noted. And that's having considered all factors within the report, including the rating sensitivity analysis, Council's financial target ratios, the primary financial goal of ongoing sustainability of its operations, and the 21-22 long-term financial plan estimates be based on an annual increase of 2.75% in general rate revenue from existing ratepayers for the next 5 years, and that Council give consideration to the updated long-term financial plan estimates and associated financial parameters that should form the central basis to the Council's 22-23 formal budget deliberations. Mayor Redmond, you had your hand up first.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a question around the asset management plans. I know that in the report it's saying prolonged vacancies of key staffing positions in the engineering services team, but they're saying that they could table them in May. What's the plan to, fill those vacancies? Or because I guess our management plans, our asset management plans underpin the long-term financial plan. So I guess I'd like to know what the thinking is around how we'll rectify that, or and how we'll move forward and ensure that we have up to date plans.
Through the chair, I can respond to that. As we've noted in the report, members, and as the Mayor's referenced, there has been a number of key vacancies in the engineering services team, with 2 of our team leaders roles, which has been unfortunate. But bearing in mind, though, the asset management plans that were endorsed for the purposes of consultation back in August are still being utilised to inform the long-term financial plan. So it's not that those plans are sort of out of date. It's just that they haven't been sort of released for consultation yet, more broadly. And we've also noted, I guess more importantly, I feel from the buildings asset management plan perspective, the external consultants that we have engaged in that process, as we've noted in the report, we were hoping to have their report before now, but they were unfortunately impacted staff-wise with COVID, and we're led to believe we should be getting their final report the end of this week, such that we're of the view that we would then be in a position to essentially not only table the be in a position to table the Buildings Asset Management Plan as noted in the report, Chair, to the 17th of May 22 audit meeting. And I'd suggest at that stage, it would likely be that we would be possibly recommending consultation on that plan, but potentially all the plans if the other plans haven't been progressed for consultation by that stage. So I guess just to reaffirm that the data in those plans is not that outside of the buildings plan. The data in those plans isn't out of date. It's just that, unfortunately hadn't been progressed for consultation at that stage. And those plans have been used to inform the update for the long-term financial plan.
Thank you.
Henry, did you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks for the chair. Now, I actually spoke to Sam Delena about this very matter today, because I'm equally mindful of the need to progress the asset management plans. And Sam advises that we have gone out to market again to recruit. And at this stage, we're looking positive in terms of 2 positions, but there is a third that is vacant. And so he's not comfortable with the candidates that we've otherwise shortlisted. And so we don't want to compromise our position in terms of that. I've been talking to Sam then about, well, do we get consultants in to help progress this particular sort of area of work? So we're having that conversation, appreciating we pay a premium when we do get consultants in, which we are on a number of other aspects of our engineering services. So it's certainly front of my mind, and further to these conversations, Paul and I will have another chat with Sam about, well, what other workarounds can we pursue? But yeah, it certainly is front of mind in terms of progressing these important documents.
The one thing to consider that I found with using consultants, if you look at employing someone and all the on costs of employing someone, the consultants aren't too bad because you're only paying for the time that they incur on the job. So that's something to consider as well. Are there any other questions, comments? Peter Brass?
Through the chair, thank you. Thanks again, Paul, for the paper. Can I just ask the actual recommendation that we're approving as a committee? We talk about the second recommendation, the 0.25 contribution towards council's next major iconic asset investment. What is that at this point in time?
Through the chair, there was a historic resolution on the books from council relative to, and this was made, I think, most really about 2 years ago, that the next iconic project would either be the Carbethan Reserve redevelopment, which is essentially sort of since commenced through grant funding we've been able to secure, such that I'll be the view that, Peter, that this next iconic project would be targeted towards a major upgrade of the Gawler Aquatic Centre in terms of the pools themselves, and that's sort of been an aspirational target from council, recognising the age of the pool itself, which I think the mayor will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's over 60 years.
1962.
1962, yeah. So just mindful of the fact that we do have ageing infrastructure out there. We have spent, to council's credit, a considerable amount of dollars in the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years each year maintaining that pool, and we have done recent renovations, upgrades in terms of the change room facilities, but this would really be earmarked towards revamping the actual pools themselves. And we're proposing from the long-term financial plan perspective that would occur within say 5 to 6 years, on the basis that through the modelling we've done, that is when we would be in the position to have the borrowing capacity to undertake the work, but it is subject to, the model is subject to securing 50% grant funding. And yeah, we're just proposing that this 0.25% additional contribution would be specifically marketed towards that next iconic project at the pool in 5 to 6 years.
Okay. Thanks.
Question, Chair.
Yep.
So just further from Peter Brass's, I'm sorry, was there somebody else?
No, sorry, go ahead, Nan.
Just further to Peter Brass's comments, where would that money, the 0.25% for the next 5 years, would that go off debt, or how would that be used?
Through the chair, look, from an accounting perspective, initially it'd be obviously reflected in our operating results, statement of comprehensive income. So from that perspective, it would be assisting the bottom line. However, the immediate flow-on effect, Mayor, is that it would be essentially helping to reduce debt over the next 5 years, and that would be on a compounding basis. So that would then be sort of helping the end goal that council's wanting to do, to reduce debt, to free up the borrowing capacity to do the next iconic project in 5 years' time.
All right. Peter Fairley-Jones, did you have a comment?
Yes, so just again on the 0.25%. So essentially, you're going to just increase the rates by 2.75%, but internally and maybe in some of your communication, you're going to say some of this is earmarked for the iconic project. Are you going to tell the community as part of the annual business plan what that iconic project is? And I guess that then forms part of the consultation. That was, I guess I was leading to whether it needs any consultation, and I suspect it doesn't need any more than being in the annual business plan effectively. That would be my take.
Yep. Through the chair, I would be of the view, Peter, that we would have to, I would be wanting to suggest to council that we market it and package it on the basis that through the consultation of the business plan, that it's acknowledging it's a 2.75% increase, but I'd be the view it's a 2.5% increase plus a 2.25% towards our next major asset project. And we would have to be, I think members would have to be clear in what that project is. I don't think the wider community would necessarily be supportive of a 0.25% increase if we're saying it's for our next major project, if we don't say what that project is. So it really does come down to how we market it and sell it, because I think safe to say the Gawler Aquatic Centre is a very much loved asset in the town, heavily used, and I'd be wanting to encourage to sell the message that yes, that 0.25% is specifically towards that future project, and it may even be a case of I guess demonstrating that whether that 0.25% in revenue each year we do actually park from an internal accounting perspective in a standalone equity reserve, so that someone actually reading our financial reports could recognise, well, yes, we went out, we sold the message that 0.25% is towards our next iconic asset. Now, there's no way I'd be suggesting that we'd have to go as far as parking this money separately and having it in a separate bank account. That would be totally against our treasury management principles. But what we could do nonetheless from an internal accounting perspective to demonstrate transparency would be that we could each year allocate that funding in an internal equity reserve just to demonstrate the process, and that those funds would then be exhausted from that internal reserve when the related works occur in 5 to 6 years time, that may be a way just to demonstrate that this is the intent of that 0.25% increase.
Yeah, and by the way, I think the strategy I have no problem with. I think it's a sensible way to approach a major investment of that nature.
Yeah. Councillor Koch, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did. Through the chair, Paul, I think you were at the Barossa Council when they did a similar thing for the funding for the REX. So what were the lessons from there that we need to take on board?
Yes, well, good question, Councillor Koch, because yes, I was there at the time, and I guess you can I suppose draw some similarities to that, in that for the benefit of other members, what happened there was the Barossa Council looked to have a major upgrade of what was I'd say the tired Barossa Rec Centre in Tanunda, and I can't remember in terms of what the total investment dollars, but it was in the millions, and they ended up with a greatly enhanced product. Now, to fund that, what they did at the time was introduce a separate rate, and I guess the learnings from that was that was sort of quite controversial at the time. It had the council sold it on the fact that the separate rate would apply for a period of time, so many years. I can't remember the exact amount of years, but what I certainly can recall is from the application of the separate rate perspective, noting that this was in Tanunda, and I can recall there was a fair degree of opposition to it from ratepayers who lived in Williamstown, for example, who would say, well, I work in Gawler or work in Adelaide, and I go to the Gawler pool on my way home from work, and I'll never use the rec centre, and why should I have to pay for it? And so those sort of conversations come about solely from the legislative mechanics of the separate rate itself, because a separate rate cannot be applied against the whole council area. You actually need to determine who's going to benefit from the project and apply the separate rate accordingly. So that's why that was a key part of my thinking in terms of not pursuing a separate rate, because you'd need to demonstrate, well, who's going to benefit and pay for it, and who's not. Whereas
yeah, thanks, Paul, because that's I remember it quite clearly, because I worked for Barossa at that time, I think, yes. And there was a lot of angst around the Barossa for that exact reason. So I'm happy that we're not going down that track. Yep. Thank you.
Peter Brass.
Thank you to the chair. Yeah, and look, I was on the audit committee and still am on the audit committee. And you're right, Paul, but, you know, interesting enough, you will always have detractors, people knocking it back, but like any new shiny toy, once it opened, you know, it was all accepted. Everyone loves it. Everyone visits there. Everyone uses it. Again, you'll always have your detractors. And again, I think your early comment, or even Peter's comment about making sure you've got the right project you're going to sell, that's backing this increase of 0.25. And yes, you will have some people, but then once it's up and going, I'll come back and say thank you. It's been great. And that's the role of council, picking the winners and not backing the losers.
Good point. Are there any other comments or questions? No.
Just one question, Chair. Sorry to.
Yep. Peter Fairley-Jones.
Just a question in relation to the reality of having what appears to be very low capital expenditure for new and upgraded assets in 25, 26 and 26, 27. I noticed in the current budget, struggling to keep things within the framework of the long-term plan a little. and that's a very small amount of what would be new expenditure. Is that a realistic? You think that's a realistic objective? Passing on to the new council.
Through the chair, I can respond to that. Peter, look, that's certainly a fair and reasonable question you put, and but it essentially comes back to, I guess, the desire and aspiration from council to reduce debt, and I've sort of consistently communicated to council that the primary way to do that is by scaling back on what I call the discretionary capital, which is the new and upgraded assets, recognising that, yes, being a major growth council, at various times there will be the trigger in demand for new, shiny and upgraded assets, certainly cognizant of that. And we certainly, as an administration, aren't advocating reducing the investment in replacement renewal. But in terms of the actual quantum of dollars, whether it's achievable, I think it is going to take a lot of financial discipline from council, certainly recognise that, and the administration. But I also think, importantly, as you recall from our last meeting, the council has since adopted the Treasury Management Policy, which has the aspirational net financial liabilities target of, I think, 75% in 3 years and 50% in 5 years. So I think, Peter, in answer to comment relative to the new council, I think Councillor Kosh, it might have been you that commented that I see that as being a strong message to the new council coming on board, that we've no longer got that ratio target of 0 to 100, which the committee collectively of the view was really too broad. So we do have that aspirational target with the ratio, and to get there, it does mean we have to scale back on the level of the discretionary capital works. And yes, I recognise that will be a challenge, but this is the sort of quantum of dollars we need to be within to get that debt down quickly, such that we can then have the borrowing capacity to do the aquatic centre in 5 to 6 years. Does that answer your question, Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Mayor Edmund, did you have a question, or are you wanting to move it?
I'm happy to move it.
So moved by Mayor Edmund. Have we got a seconder? Peter Brass, it's a second. All in favour? Show of hands. And carried. All right, we'll move on to the next item. So item 6.3 was a review of the draft 22-23 annual budget. The officer's recommendation was the Audit and Risk Committee recommends to council that the review of the draft 22-23 annual budget report be noted, that council, as part of its upcoming formal 22-23 annual budget deliberations, work with the guiding 22-23 key financial indicator parameters disclosed in the long-term financial plan. The council notes that a further draft 22-23 annual budget update will be tabled to a special council meeting on the 15th of March in consideration of the key financial indicator parameters. And council notes that a further subsequent review of the updated draft 22-23 annual budget will be taken by the Audit and Risk Committee at its 17th of May 22 meeting. Mayor Edmund, did you have a question, or did someone want to talk to the report?
No.
Or you'd like to?
No,
I still got your hand up from last time.
Hand off. Sorry.
Would you mind putting your hand down? Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Now, did anyone want to talk to this report before we take questions?
Or through the chair, while I'm on the roll, I can talk to the report. Look, members, this is obviously the very much an initial draft version of the 22-23 budget, and as you can appreciate there's multiple sort of tentacles that inform the budget relative to not only the operating result, but also the budget bids from a capital expenditure new initiative perspective. So in terms of really just, I guess, setting the scene for you in terms of the key points as they stand at the moment, is that, as we've noted in attachment 1, members, I guess in reference to the key financial indicators from operating results, we're currently looking at a operating surplus of 115,000, and Chair, we've referenced in the report that the long-term financial plan model that we've just discussed, that was predicated on a indicative, I think, $79,000 increase for 22-23. As we've noted in the report, the only reason why the draft budget as it stands at the moment from an operating perspective is slightly higher than that is simply because we've factored in the additional revenue from the top tier of commercial properties, should council wish to go down that path. So from an operating result, we're currently looking at what I call a relatively small surplus, certainly a small surplus in comparison to our total operating income of nearly $35 million. But from a capital expenditure perspective, noting that the value of what we're calling the bids above the line, as they stand at the moment, is oversubscribed to what we have in the long-term financial plan. And what we're proposing via the recommendation is that we will then come back to council, the special council meeting on the 15th of March, which will be the first conversation that the council has in terms of formal discussion about the budget. So we're acknowledging that at this stage, the capital bids are oversubscribed to the long-term financial plan. The administration will, over coming weeks, further consider that accordingly, because as we've noted in with the financial indicators, that based on the draft budget as it stands, that net financial liabilities ratio, based on the figures as they stand at the moment, would only be nominally reducing to 88.5%, whereas the long-term financial plan estimates is predicated on that reducing to 85.7%. So the Chair, moving forward from here, it would be the primary intent would be to further review the capital expenditure bids in terms of above the line, below the line, to get within that long-term financial plan parameters and present that as a report to the 15th of March special council meeting, such that will then be the first juncture where the elected members can make formal decisions relative to moving projects above the line, below the line, etc., as has been the normal customary process each year. And as we've noted as recommendation 4, Chair, noting in that respect that the council would recognise that this is the Audit and Risk Committee's first look at the initial figures as they're presented for your important comment and feedback on. But then once the council has endorsed the draft budget for consultation, that will then come back to this committee for a further review and feedback, which will be considered as part of the consultation feedback to then go to council in, I think, early June. So I just wanted to sort of explain the sequential steps from here, but more than happy to answer any question that members may have.
Okay, are there any questions? Kelly-Jones?
Just a quick one. I know you're looking at a 2.75% increase in rates. How is that going to apply also to the minimum rate? Is that how that's going to work as well?
Through the Chair, yes, that would be my intent.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Peter Brass? We can't hear you, Peter.
In one of the lines, you talked about boundary reform. So what's that all in relation to? You put aside $120,000 for boundary reform?
Through the chair, the budget for the current budget for 2021-22 does provide a $250,000 budget bid for the Boundaries Commission to do an investigation relative to boundary reform, relative to Light Regional Council and Barossa Council, and to a lesser degree Playford. So the funding in the budget, members, is specifically earmarked for that investigation, but more recently what we've been advised by the Commission is the timing of that investigation is now likely to not occur until after the council election this year, such that with the next quarterly budget review to council this year, we'd be looking to transition the funding from 21-22 into the 22-23 budget as a timing variation.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments? I don't see anyone waving at me.
I'm happy to move that way.
Okay, so Peter Bruss happy to move. Is there anyone to second? Mayor Redmond second. Yep. And all in favour? Raise of hands. Yep. So that's been carried. Update the minutes. All right, so item 7 on the agenda is items listed for discussion. Are there any items? No? Then we go to item 8, which is questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice? No. And item 9 is motions without notice. No. Very speedy. All right. If there's any other comments before we close the meeting? Yes, Peter Bruss.
Just through the chair, Paul, are we going to get the external audit annual plan? Is that what we're looking at in the next meeting of March?
Yes, through the chair. What will be presented to the next meeting on the 17th of March will be twofold from the external auditors, their external audit plan, and also their management letter in relation to the interim audit that they conducted on site only last week. So those documents will be presented to the next meeting in March.
All right, through the chair, and will they be attending the actual meeting? I know it'll be through Zoom, but will they? Okay.
Yes, okay. We've already alerted them to the fact that we'd be wanting them to attend via Zoom and speak to both their management letter and their audit plan.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments? No. Okay. Well, therefore, we declare the meeting closed at 8:01 p.m. according to my computer, with our next meeting being on the 17th of March at 7 o'clock, and that is via Zoom. Is that right, Paul Howard? Yep.
Yes.
So another one via Zoom. And we're all done.
Very good. Well done, Natalie.
Thanks, everyone. I'm happy.
Thank you, Chair.
Happy anyone to email and call me with feedback. I know it was a bit clunky, but we'll hopefully be better next time.
That's fine. It was very quick.
Entertaining. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Enjoy your evening.
Okay.
See
See you
ya.
later. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.